Hello again, Josh Zaring, Zaring Studios. Today I'm going to show you how to create an HDR panorama, and I'm going to be using PTGui, PTGui.com, and Photoshop to combine and blend exposures afterwards after I combine all the HDR images. You can also do this by creating in Photoshop or any other program that combines HDR images and then stitching together your HDR to create a panorama. But PTGui is the easiest way because it combines everything all at once and lets you adjust everything. Also, afterwards, I'm going to show you what it would have looked like as a regular panorama so you can see the differences in dynamic range. I'm not going to go too far with the HDR. I'm not a huge fan of HDR, like the typical, stereotypical, if you will, that look of the haloed, slightly like a lot of people say overbaked look. I'm just using it to make it look a little bit more surrealistic, not so much cartoony, but more realistic, and then just a touch above that with the detail, the colors, the vibrance, everything, and the dynamic range just extended a little bit beyond what you would have shot as a normal panorama. I'm going to start off with a very simple, it's 12 images. These are bracketed 3 ways. So we have the regular -3 and +3 EV bracketed. So there are 4 sets of 3. And I'm going to be uploading this in a program called PTGui, which I've used in a few other tutorials here. It's the best for, in my personal opinion, for stitching, especially large panos and 360-degree panos. It just gets the job done, does it really quickly, and I usually don't have too many problems with having to go in and retouch a lot of problems like where the stitches are. It's been really good so far. And you can see I have all 12 images here that I imported, and I'm going to go to Exposure HDR and select True HDR with the tone map settings. I don't use the exposure fusion. I don't like the way it looks. I try to avoid the typical overbaked HDR look at all costs. I'm going for a more surrealist look and not a outlined with halos look. I don't want it to look like it's overbaked, I'd say. So I just click on the tone map settings, let it generate a preview. So first thing I do when I'm in this view is turn off the auto boost shadows and reduce highlights because I don't want any program doing anything automatically like that for me. And I will start with the compression, get that up there, like 80 some percent. Just play around with a starting point, bump up the contrast a little bit, and you can see it's just turning black. And now I will boost the shadows until it looks like a normal photo. And I can see that typical HDR look where the colors, like when you start, sort of faded, almost washed out in a way. And, you know, you just boost the saturation. PTGui, unlike a lot of programs, doesn't process with like a heavy-handed processing, meaning like if I bump the saturation up all the way, it's not like Technicolor Rainbow automatically. It's more, it's closer to realist, like a realist color. And the contrast too, it's not really overly contrasted. Like it won't automatically blow out the highlights. So I'm gonna lay off the compression for this. Right now, this section here, all the trees and the entire town here, I want it to look what I'll just say normal. I just want it to look good at the bottom here. And right now I don't care about the sky. A lot of point behind this was I was at a high vantage point to get the town, but I wanted a lot of the sky, and this was a very stormy day. There was actually a lot of fog when I was up here. The compression and contrast kind of took that out. But back here, you can see how foggy it is. Okay, now I'm going to click OK, create a panorama using the TIFF format. I'm going to get out of the safe range and just go for the a larger pano, which is 20,000 pixels wide. And tone map panorama. And in the TIFF settings, I always go 16-bit. I like to work with more than I need with no compression. And then create panorama. This time I care about the sky, so I do not care about the lower region where the land is. And so I'm going to maybe not make that quite as dark, not as saturated. And it's good to just mess around with it until you like what you see, because I'm not only doing HDR here, I'm also going to do an exposure blend with the top and bottom so I can get the sky how I want it and the land how I want it. And pretty much I want it just a little bit more surreal than what I know I saw with my eyes when I shot it. That seems to be pretty close here. I'm going to click OK and export again, and this time to the file I add sky. Create panorama. So now we're in Photoshop CC, and I'm going to go to File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack, and I'm going to bring those two photos in. And even though they should perfectly align, just do it. It's a nice, neat package. Okay, I definitely want my sky on top, and I'm going to create a mask there. Grab my brush tool, and sometimes it's easier to just disable the lower portion so you can see what you're erasing. I'm just gonna get rid of the lower part of this, actually up to here. I'm just gonna get that back on there. You can see we already got a nice start. We got vibrant trees and buildings here, and then dark gray sky. And that's what I'm going for here, is a nice, a very moody, stormy day over Middleburg, Pennsylvania, where I currently reside. So I'm going to, instead of leaving that how it is, I'm going to try soft light, and you can see that just adds the color back in and just a little bit of punch, a little bit more contrast. You don't want it to look too, well, I don't want it to look too nasty. So you can try overlay, and if the whites are too blown out, you can try soft light, which usually works for me. I use soft light a lot. And to compare that with normal, again, here's normal, and it's a little too gray. And I did desaturate a bit when I exported this layer, but that seems to be about right there. So that's before, after. And that's basically what I'm doing with that. Now I'm going to create another layer, a curve adjustment layer, and that's right here. And I'm going to pull down the midtones a little bit, just to darken. And then I'm going to go here, grab my black brush again, make it real huge, and just kind of make a big circle here. And that's basically just a vignette. And I'm going to soft light that. You can see we darkened it a little bit. And I'm going to also back off of that. Just a very subtle darkening around the edges. And I'm actually going to go back in here and pull up the blacks a little bit. Now, if you want to, in these areas here, I'm going to create another layer here. Dodge and burn. And that, I'm going to use a very much smaller brush for that. And I'm going to take my blacks, and everywhere that's already dark, I'm going to just paint in just a few areas that I want darker. And that's just to increase the contrast a little bit. Make sure you're on another layer. Make sure you're not directly on one of the main layers here. And you can do as much or as little as you want here. Just make sure it doesn't look, just make sure it looks realistic. And then I'm going to hit X, my white brush, and just add in a few little highlights. Not as many of these. Then I'm going to go to Gaussian Blur. And you're going to want to really blur this. You don't want any distinct shapes in this. That's even 401. This is a very large pano. It's 20,000 pixels wide. So any effects that you do to it, any things like blur, radial blur, Gaussian blur, you're gonna have to go up a lot further than you normally would for a pano because it's a larger image. So then you just, once again, you can try overlay. If you like that, that's good. I'm going to go with soft light because it's a little more subtle. And you can see the difference here. It just adds a little bit of, just a little bit more when you dodge and burn a little bit. I'm going to add a little group here so you can see somewhat of a before and after. This is without doing anything, just a regular HDR. And this is after. A lot of sky and a little bit vignette. Now I'm going to go ahead and put those together. And I'm going to straighten that out a bit. Turn my guides on. Now I'm just going to crop it. And actually this is close to 16:9, so I'm going to try 16:9. Yeah, that is very close. So get some of the graveyard out of there. And let's over here kind of center this a little bit, this bell tower. Try to center that. That was the main focus here. And there we have it. So there it is. Just in case you wondered what it would have looked like without the HDR, you have the ability to do that easily. This is what it would look like. And it's obviously a huge difference. And with the naked eye, I can obviously tell you that your camera doesn't capture, you know, exactly what you see. You got to work with it. This is not what I saw. It's a little bit hazier than what I remember. And this is closer. It's a little bit more surreal, a little bit more maybe unrealistic, but it's a more saturated, detailed version of what I saw. And that's much better than the regular pano. And so that's why I decided to do this. I just recently got into this because I now have the capability with PTGui, and I'm really digging this. I'm not a big fan of HDR to begin with. As long as I do this with the intent of making it look more realistic and maybe a little bit more surrealistic than the HDR look, which I honestly think is kind of fading with time. People are used to seeing it. It's not a big shock anymore. This, to me, when I look at it, I look down from the high point, one of the highest points of the town I live in, and, you know, it's good feelings, you know. This is, it's just a snapshot to me. There's not enough detail. There's not enough color. It's not what I remembered seeing to begin with. And this is closer to what I remember seeing. So doing HDR panos can help you express what you've seen more closely than a regular pano. Regular pano, though, if you work with it in Photoshop and bring out all the dynamic range and bring out all the color, you could definitely get close to this. Maybe even better than this. But this is what I wanted to do with this tutorial. And as you can see, comparing a regular pano to an HDR pano there's a definite huge difference here. I could do a lot more with this. This is all with RAW files, so you could definitely bring out more in the non-HDR. If you just bracket your shots to begin with, you have a lot more to work with. And even if you end up exporting the -3, +3, and 0 layers and blending it instead of using HDR, you'll still end up with a lot of dynamic range, and that's the whole point here. Thanks for watching. I hope this put you well on your way to creating HDR panoramas, and if you've already been doing it, I hope this made something a little bit easier. I hope I helped you in some small way. I would like to see your panoramas. Please tag me at instagram.com/jzaringphoto. Feel free to tag me in your HDR panoramas or anything else you would like me to see. I'd really love to see it, and if I really like it, it might end up in a video. And if you don't want that to happen, just let me know. For up-to-date information as well as settings, presets, you name it, all my videos are also available on jzaring.com, www.jzaring.com, as well as my youtube.com/jzaringstudios and instagram.com/jzaringphoto. Subscribe and join up with me, and let's start making awesome images together. Thanks for watching. Keep creating and keep it awesome. Join me on Patreon.com to take part in special rewards like priority question and answer, Lightroom and Photoshop presets and actions, BTS videos and photos, previews for upcoming content, and even suggest ideas for tutorials. And also you have the option of being credited for your support of Zaring Studios, which is really cool. Check it out at patreon.com/jzaring.